So thanks for having me. I'm not surprised that you haven't heard of process mining. Process mining is a decade-old analysis form that's only been in Power BI and only available in Power BI for maybe a couple of years now. So I'll talk a lot more about that. But first, my name's Daniel Hughes. I am with Process Analytics Factory. We are a process mining vendor that decided to build our whole platform on Power BI instead of going to market alone. So we think that's a great strategy to partner with Microsoft when you possibly can. I've been in the software business for 20 years. My background was started with SharePoint, and I built a software company that used SharePoint as a content management platform. Then moved from there into intelligent automation and built an intelligent automation company that helped mortgage processors automate as much of their online lending as possible so that you can get through that process really quick. Then moved into data and analytics, and from there found process mining as a really interesting avenue. And Gartner says that that's going to grow 200% a year over the next 5 years or so. So I launched a process mining company in North America a couple of years ago, and then saw Process Analytics Factory, and their product was based on Microsoft Power BI, and said, you know, I did this with SharePoint and saw how crazy successful that was, and decided that I was going to help PAF launch in North America. So that's what I do today. That's what I've done in 2020, and it's been a crazy wild ride. So today, I want to talk about first, what is process mining? I think a little bit background on that is probably important. Then I'll talk about use cases. That seems to help everybody really understand as we dive deep into talking about where the data comes from to make it work. And then talk about why we did that in Power BI instead of building our own analytics application on top of that, and what advantages we have there. And then most of the time, I'll probably use in a demo to show you what it looks like in action, show you how you mine your processes in Power BI, what information you can get from that, and then how you can use it in your business to make changes. At the end, we'll take questions. I have Jenny on the line that can help answer some of those in the chat as we go along. And then at the very end, I'll give you a link where you can download and use some of our technology for free. So let's first start with what is process mining, right? Companies today are really going through challenges and moving from a defensive posture around processes to using processes as a competitive weapon. You know, you can think about all the disruption that happened in 2020, and even beyond that, and before that, in certain industries. But in 2020, many companies had to figuring out what their customer journey looked like and how to support customers as they migrated from in-person to virtual. And customers could be, you know, not just people that buy the products, but employees, right? Employees were really disrupted. Even supply chains were really disrupted. So a lot of companies decided, hey, let's look at our processes and figure out how we can really take advantage of this disruption and improve our market position. And the old way of doing that, and there's technology that's done this for decades, is to go in and ask your subject matter experts, what is your process? How do you execute a transaction? How do you execute a accounts payable transaction or a procurement transaction? How do you execute a order, right? Go from a quote to an order to production. And then once it's delivered, how do you go from, what is your process for production to collection? And you interview your people in the field. You might even go out and do a time and motion study and actually time how long it takes to do each step. I did that when I was doing intelligent automation, I would go and sit with underwriters and say, show me what you do, and use my stopwatch to time how long it took for them to do that to figure out if that was a good step for automation. And all of that led to really anecdotal evidence of how a process was executed. And I would really only see the top 1 or 2 or 3% of the way transactions happened. So process mining wants to take that and turn it on its head and look at the data that's already in your systems and use that data to recreate processes and recreate every single transaction that's happened in your business. So you can think of it as a digital twin of your process, and maybe even a digital twin of your entire organization. Process mining as a methodology was invented, around about a decade ago in Germany by a fellow named Will van der Alst. And he taught that as a class at his university. And all of his students took that and as a part of a class, developed process mining algorithms and tools to help with process mining. And out of that came a number of process mining companies that all started in Germany and then have spread mostly through Europe and starting to get into North America. Because one, it's so new, and two, it was based mostly in Europe. Most people in North America haven't heard of it. And so that's why I wasn't really surprised. And what all of those companies did was build out analytics on top of the mining algorithms. So they built out dashboards, they built out visuals, they built out data ingestion, all the things that Microsoft Power BI obviously does really well, being positioned in the far upper right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So what are the use cases, right? Process mining takes your data, turns it into a digital twin. How is that really going to help? The top two, and this is the vast majority of the processes that we work with, are procure to pay and order to cash. And most of those are in manufacturing. And I think it's likely that those are the ones we focus on and companies tend to adopt process mining for, is because it's all based on dollars. There's really strong ROI when you can improve your working capital, right? You can improve your cash collections from your customers. You can get your cash in faster, and you can do one of two things in payments. You can either capture your discounts, early pay discounts, or in a lot of cases, funny enough, people want to extend their payment terms as far as possible without running into penalties from their vendors. But beyond that, there's a lot of really interesting use cases from production planning. How do you plan your shop floor to make sure that you have enough inventory on hand, that you can deliver your orders on time, and that you don't end up with bottlenecks on your shop floor. Customer support is also a really interesting one, issue to resolution, especially now that most all of these issue to resolution cases have moved online. An interesting one here is not necessarily issue to resolution, but one of our customers in Canada, Fortis, out of Alberta, actually uses our software with Salesforce data to track their service delivery. So when a customer comes in and requests service at a particular address, they have a specific steps that they go through to analyze whether they have service or had service in the past, determine what it's going to cost to deliver service there, what steps they need to go through, potentially get the customer a quote, get them to pay, and then schedule the delivery. So all of that is an end-to-end process that we can map and recreate and show them where the bottlenecks are, help them identify what customers are most likely to actually pay and go through with the request, and then help them streamline their operations to get power service out to their customers. ERP transformation has been around for a while. A lot of companies needed to go from SAP ECC6 to S/4HANA. And one major step in that is to identify what your current processes are on ECC6, identify what customizations you made, how often those customizations are used, and then transfer all of that through Solution Manager into S/4HANA. So companies can identify, hey, we made all these one-off customizations in ECC6. They might have only been used a couple of times. So can we not make those customizations, save money, and handle those as manual steps as we move to S/4HANA, save a lot of time in customization, custom development, and also in implementation times. RPA is really hot, identifying what processes need to be automated, what steps in that process could be automated, and then simulating whether or not automating a specific step is actually going to improve cycle time or reduce cost, or just move the bottleneck from one step to another. Customer journey is one. Internal audit is really interesting. GM uses process mining and internal audit to sample 100% of their transactions for procure to pay, and then identify any irregularities or any violations of internal controls. And then they can specifically align their audit to look at those transactions without having to sample and hope they identify where the problems are. Supply chain is a really interesting one. Hire to retire, right? Your HR system, loan origination. My background with automating that led to a lot of insights that we could get from process mining. But really interesting, edge use cases that is probably not applicable to everybody, but it is at least interesting, is Air Canada uses our process mining software to do a number of different things. One of those is aircraft turns at the airports. The Canadian government mandates that they report every flight delay, and they have to categorize every flight delay. And so they were able to use process mining to look at all the steps that it takes to turn an aircraft from the time it hits the runway till it taxis to the gate, through 12 different departments and 11 vendors that have to, restock the plane, clean, check for safety, maintenance issues and things like that. So all of that from end to end to turn an aircraft enables them to automatically assign flight delay codes that they can then report to the Canadian government and not have to manually do that anymore. So it saved them a lot of money there. They're also taking telemetry data in flight from 787s and recreating the entire flight from the time the door is closed, sends a signal through sensors to pushback, to taxi, to takeoff, acceleration, altitude, speed, and even flight attendant call buttons is all sensor data that they ingest into Power BI and map that flight. And then next thing that they're doing is maintenance records. So can they keep the planes in the air, reduce the time for maintenance by mapping their maintenance process to figure out where those bottlenecks are, and then extend that into predictive maintenance using the sensor data on the plane, the parts and people that they need to do the replacements, and make sure that the planes are in the right place when they're potentially going to have an issue, with the parts that are available and the technicians to make the changes. So being able to do that every day that they can reduce their maintenance by saves them $2 million in parts that they have to keep on hand. So there's a lot of use cases for process mining that people may not really think about. And the payback is really, really high, right? We've seen customers have a 10% reduction in days payable outstanding, right? It means they collect their cash faster. 60% improvement in invoice processing time. If you want to reduce your days sales outstanding, you want to collect faster, right? 5% reduction there. And we talked about Air Canada reducing their cost $2 million a day for every day that they can shorten their maintenance windows. So how do we do that, right? So all of that's really great, but how does that actually work? What data do you need to make process mining work? And it's really pretty simple. All of the data that you need to make this happen is stored in your transactional systems, in your ERP system, or in your financial systems. We work with a lot of SAP, a lot of Oracle, a lot of Infor. Microsoft Dynamics is obviously really big as we're partnered with Power BI and Microsoft around that, but also things like Salesforce or ServiceNow is another one. Got a call yesterday, somebody that wanted to implement it with Coupa. So lots and lots of different applications, but it's all the applications that you have and where your data is stored today. And to be able to recreate your process, we only need 3 pieces of data, right? One is a transaction ID, right, or a unique case ID. What is the unique ID that we can use to follow a transaction from the start, where your process starts, to the end, right? So what number, what information do we have, say, purchase order number, that starts from the time you issue a purchase order that you match to the invoice and that you match to the payable, or purchase requisition number if you want to go through an approval process and track all of that. So simply, what is it in your ERP system that tracks a case from end to end? Second, we need an activity name, or what happened, right? Did you issue the purchase order? Did you get an approval, or did you issue the purchase rec? Did you get an approval for the purchase requisition? Did you get a level 1, 2, or 3 approval, right? What are the steps that your transactions go through in your process? Or we simply need a name. And then third, we need to know when did that happen, right? We need a timestamp from your audit logs that tell us when that step happened for that transaction. And with those 3 pieces of information, our process mining algorithms can go and recreate a transaction, a process from end to end, and identify every different way that process was executed. Now that'll recreate the process, but to be able to take action on it, you probably need some additional information. And we call that additional information attributes. So think if you wanted to compare your purchase process between plants. One of the attributes we would want to collect is plant number. That way we can look at all the different transactions per plant. If you wanted to track vendor reliability by country, you would need to collect an attribute for vendor that went through that order process and the country that vendor was associated with. So depending on what questions you want to answer, what problems you want to solve, depends on what additional attributes we collect. And we do that through an ETL process, right? Just like you're doing an ETL process to get data into your Power BI for your KPI reports, we do the same thing for process mining. So we have pre-built extractors for a lot of the ERP systems. We know what data to go get. We know where in the tables that data is. We extract that data into your data warehouse, then do some transformation to take all the data from the disparate tables, convert them to a single table for mining, and then do some additional transformation to make sure that we can do things like measure the time between steps and measure the time inside of a step, and then be able to slice and dice the data to help you make better decisions. That data is loaded into Power BI, and then we pick it up with our process visuals or process mining visuals. Gartner has a whole list of capabilities, right? Gartner has issued 2 process mining market guides. I don't want to go through these in too much depth, but there's about 10 different core capabilities that Gartner lines out for process mining. One is automated discovery, right? That's the simple part. That's being able to recreate your process. Two is checking conformance, right? Can we identify what your ideal process is, and then how transactions are varying from that process, and notify you when a transaction is headed off path. Data prep is really important, right? Being able to create the data model that you can report on. Process mining started, though, as a rear view mirror, a look at what happened in the past. But now, Gartner sees, and the industry's catching up, to be able to look at real-time dashboards and look at how your process is being executed right now in transactions that are going through your system. You need to be able to enhance the model, add all the attributes, not just do discovery. And processes are really complex. So being able to look at how processes interact with each other, right? You might have a quoting process that turns into an order process that turns into a collections process. And that whole process is quote to cash, but it might be across systems, it might have unique IDs. So one of the really important things in process mining is being able to track transactions across all of those different processes. And then supporting customer journeys is pretty new too, and it's really complex. You know, I have a customer here in the States where we did a customer journey project, and we found 845,000 variations of their customer journey, right? So being able to visualize 845,000 different ways a process is executed is really difficult. So being able to do that takes all the power of Power BI, and some of the other, some of the process mining vendors that don't have that level of analytical capability aren't able to do that. And then, it's fine to look in the rearview mirror, but can you predict, right? Can you do predictive or prescriptive analysis? Can you predict what's going to happen with a transaction, the next step in the transaction, and then can you prescribe what actions you should take with that prediction? So all of that takes advantage of the Microsoft Power Platform and the Power Stack. And then one of the real key capabilities and where the market is headed, and it's why we love being partnered with Microsoft, is being able to take actions on what you find in your processes, right? If you see that a vendor in Asia is going to deliver late because of a pandemic, right, and they're shut down, can you automatically take action and identify a vendor in a less impacted region that has the product on hand, automatically reissue a purchase order, or at a minimum, notify somebody that you're about to have a problem in your process and allow them to take action, is the next place that this is really going. And being able to partner with Microsoft, with Power Apps, with Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and the whole Power Platform, is a really huge win for us. And then task mining, Microsoft just came out with this. If you know anything about Power Automate, they call it Process Advisor, where they actually record what happens on the desktop and then allow you to build your bots around that. And that, for all of those reasons, is why we took process mining and did not build a standalone application, but embedded it in Power BI, in the business intelligence platform where it belongs. No reason to recreate analytics, no reason to recreate the data pipelines, no reason to build out the predictive or prescriptive analytics, no reason to build out the action connectors, but use Power Platform, use everything that's already in there. And it's been a really massive win for us to be able to take advantage of the data factories and machine learnings and all the 400 connectors of Power Platform and the IoT, right? We don't have to build out IoT sensors to connect to, or IoT collections to connect to the 787 data. Microsoft's already done all of that for us. It allows us to go all the way from discovery to taking action without having to build all of that, and take advantage of, the Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for data or BI and analytics for low code, no code, right? All of that stuff that Microsoft already has. And it's gotten us a lot of visibility, right? Gartner recognizes that we're a leader in state-of-the-art process mining in Power BI, take advantage of all of that. Microsoft has recognized us and issued a number of press releases around our partnership in their Power Platform program. And it's led to, tremendous growth. We've only started our product in 2018, roughly, with one customer in Europe. Got recognized from Gartner in the 2018 process mining analysis, picked up by PwC as a process mining managed service in 2019, and last year launched in North America and grew over 200%. So being partnered with Microsoft has been really, really helpful. So that's enough PowerPoint. Let me move over and show you a demonstration of what that looks like in action. So you probably recognize this as Microsoft Power BI, right? Everything we do is embedded in Power BI, including taking advantage of all the filters, all the visualizations in Power BI, and all the data pipeline and all the fields and everything that Power BI offers. What we add is a set of 10 custom visuals that turn Power BI into a process mining application, right? One of those is the Process Explorer. And basically, this is the visual that takes the audit log and turns it into a process map that you can view. Process map starts at the beginning and goes to the end of your process and includes all of the steps, right? We talked about events. Here's the steps that we're looking at, and then also calculates the time between each one of those steps. You can see that my data comes from, it's order to cash, and it comes from SAP. We have 185,000 cases, or 185,000 transactions that happened and went through this process. And we can see that a transaction, one of these transactions was executed in 9,123 different ways. So if you were going to go and ask one of your employees or your subject matter experts, how do you execute a transaction? I guarantee you would not get 9,123 different answers. You would probably get the most common variants. And the way a transaction is executed, we call a variant, right? You see there's over 9,000 of those. And what we can do is we can visualize the most common ways. So this is the most common ways, 18,797 times. The process was executed in this way. As we go down, we can include more and more of the variants and see that the process becomes more and more complex, right? We see that we skip steps sometimes. We skip order blocks. We skip multiple steps. Right? We have loops, and we can see, if I can find a loop here. We have loops in our process. I'll build it out a little more to find a loop. We have loops in our process where, here we go, where processes or steps go back to the same step over and over. Set, sales order, delivery blocks happens over and over and over. And we can see as we build out and look at more of our variants, our process becomes more and more and more complex, right? Nobody designs their process to be executed this way. If we take it all the way, this is going to get really, really messy and turn into just a spaghetti chart and look at all 9,128 different ways it's executed. It turns into a real mess. But the good news is, with our filter, one of our other custom visuals, you can filter your data down to just the most common ways that it's executed. So what you look at in the Process Explorer here shows you not just the way it was executed, but where are your bottlenecks, right? We highlight in red where the steps take the most time. So we see 30 days. It takes 30 days for variant 4 for somebody to go from create sales order position to post an invoice. And we can have a tooltip to show us, how many different, can't really point at it or it goes away, but in my duration, how long that typically happens or takes for different steps, what plants this most often happens at, what resources, these are people, these are anonymized people so that we don't impact GDPR, right? What people execute this step most often, how often it's automated, and then what's the value of your sales orders going through this process, right? So we can show you all of that for any one of these as we're going down through here. So that's the basics of process mining, right? That allows us to take your audit log and turn it into a visual of your process so that you can see what happens and what's going on, right? So that you can start your analysis to see where you want to take action. And that is actually available for free, and I'll give you a link to that where you can download it and use it in Power BI here at the end of the demo. And all that takes is 3 pieces of data. All you need is your transaction ID, your event names, and your timestamps. But the next thing you want to do is be able to compare, right? You might want to be able to compare. In this case, we're going to compare processes, sales orders, and order to cash processes between plants. So you can see we have a pre-built analysis, a pre-built report that allows us to look at any of these processes between plants. And I've compared, in this case, a plant 1100 to a plant 1101. And you can see plant 1100 executes their order to cash processes in 83 days, where 1101 executes it in 41 days. That's a big, big difference. They're getting an order and collecting their money almost over a month faster, which really impacts working capital. And so we can look at why, right? We see that, a plant 1100 does their process 329 ways, where 1101 uses 233 ways. 233 might be still a lot, but it's 100 less than plant 1100. And we can start and look at this and see that the biggest change is right here at the top, right? It's 43 days for 1,837 transactions to go from create sales order position to create delivery. So they have something in here in their sales order process and their production process that's causing them to be over a month slower than this plant. Right? We highlight that in red so that you know exactly where to go and start looking. So, it's really easy to build out these visuals. We chose plant, but you could simply drag on other fields, right? Instead of plant, you might want to look at resource, and you could drag on resource, right, to make these changes. You might want to look at region. So if you have in your data, you have plant region, and you want to look at Texas, for instance, or where I live, you might want to be able to compare, hey, why did, it might have to be a power plant. Why did all your power plants shut down, right? Why couldn't you deliver power over the last week? And drag region or state or something like that into your comparison. Some of the other reports that we deliver are lead times. So you might want to look at how does the number of steps in your process or your process impact your lead times. Right? So you can go in here and say, all right, what is it that's causing my lead times to be 12% of my cases to take over 102 days? Right? And we can start filtering all of our processes to show us, all right, here's the process that we're going through. Every for all transactions that take over 102 days. And you could see that, well, 7,000 of those cases, of those transactions, took 58 days for our create sales order position to create delivery, right? And so we're starting to see a pattern that this is a step that we might want to look into, and we might want to see what's going on. And then another thing that you can do is look at conformance. So you might want to say, hey, that step in my process is not something that we even want to have. It takes way too long. So I might want to go and either take a look in Visio and map out my process, right, from start to finish. A lot of companies have already done this, done their subject matter expert in and use and built out their process map. So we might all of our variants and how our process was executed to that. So we can do that right here side by side. Here's your process as designed in Visio, and then here's how it's executed, and we can compare those and automatically check off inside of the Visio diagram everywhere that the process was executed. If you haven't done that, and this is probably the better way if you haven't done that, is you can actually come in here and say, all right, this is the way my process is executed most often. This is the straight through path that goes through all of the steps. I simply want to come in here and say, this is my conforming process. This is what I want to happen. Give it the thumbs up, and then you can compare every other transaction to that. So you can see now, here's my green, here's my red. This is what I did not want to happen, but did happen in variant 2. And the yellow shows me what didn't happen that was supposed to. Right, so now that you know you've defined what conforming is, and you know when transactions are leaving that path, you can use Power Apps or Power Automate or some of the other technologies in the Power Platform to actually take action on these transactions that go outside of your approved process. Right, so you can be notified immediately. You can automatically send emails. You can get alerts in Teams, or there's 400 different connectors. You could actually take action in SAP if you wanted to do that, and even move a transaction or reset a transaction. So those are some of the things that you can actually do. So, but what does that look like, right? What does that look like for, let's say, a manufacturer that wants to look at on-time delivery, right? We talked about what are the use cases, but what does it really look like? So this is one of our content packs, we call it, for SAP order to cash in a manufacturing plant. Every one of them that I talk to is concerned about on-time delivery. How do they get their products from order out to their customers on time, on the time that they promised and at the time their customers need them? So we look. This is a standard visualization from Microsoft, the line stacked and column chart. And we can see that we have 54,000 deliveries that were delivered too late. So if we want to look at 6/1 of 2019, so let's look at June of 2019, and let's look at the 4,400 transactions that were delivered too late. If I click on that, one of our visuals is what we call a root cause analyzer. So what this does is it looks at all the attributes that you collected around your process, plant, vendor, country code, transportation route, those things, and shows you what is the root cause, what's the most common scenarios or combinations of attributes that showed late delivery in June of 2019. Right, we can see that the customers in Taiwan that we tried to deliver by sea accounted for 38.6% of those transactions. We can do that for the next month for July. See, that's 27%, the same thing. In August, 18%, same thing. All right, so it's getting a little better, but still, our most common scenario is delivered to Taiwan by sea. So what we can do here is say, all right, that's what I want to look at, right? I want to filter all of my cases to only my transactions that were delivered to customers in Taiwan by sea. And I want to drill through, take those transactions and look at my supply chain. Figure out, hey, is my deliveries, late deliveries caused by my supply chain? So when I filter through that, automatically we'll bring up our supply chain. It'll filter it down to only transactions or orders that we delivered to Taiwan by sea. And we can look at our process over here to figure out why that is, right? Is it our vendors that's causing that problem? We scroll out, right? We scroll out on our process. We can see that 37 days out of our 80-day lead time for Taiwan orders delivered by sea was caused by a delivery block, right? From set sales order delivery block to release sales order delivery block was 37 days. So we can then predict, hey, this is probably one of our biggest issues. So let me only include cases that went through this step. I'm not really worried about these that didn't go through that step because that was 11 days. That's going to be a lot faster. So only include cases that went through that step. So now we filtered our cases down again to that, and we can drill through and say, let's look at those cases in our blocks. See what's causing our blocks for Taiwan delivered by sea. We can see that set sales order delivery is the biggest block. We can see that it happened, it's getting better over time, but our sales order, sales office 610 is probably the worst. So let's filter all of those sales blocks by 610, and let's see if we have any root causes. Well, so we have a root cause for sales order type, whatever this is in German, is our biggest offender, right? So maybe we need to dive into that area. So you can see that by using process mining, you not only can look at your KPIs that you could do in Power BI right now, but you can look in what's causing your KPIs to be off track, right? What steps in your process are causing you the biggest problem. Filter out all of your cases by those steps that are causing the biggest problem, and then improve your process. I drill down to the root cause of what's causing your KPIs to be off. So that's what I wanted to go through today. I wanted to leave a little bit of time, I think, for questions if we want to do that. Let me go back to my deck here. See if I can move it. Leave a little bit of time for questions, and then we'll go through. I'll get you the link so that you can download the free visual from AppSource, and get you the link so that you can look at the survey. So questions, I didn't see any in the chat. I don't know how we do this, if it's open your mic or type them in the chat. None? All right then. If there are no questions, here's the download. So bit.ly/free visual, capital F, capital V. It is definitely case sensitive. And then you can follow us on LinkedIn, shoot me an email if you have any questions, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Be happy to connect there and look at any of the articles that I've posted and things like that.
There are some questions being asked right now. So,
Perfect. All right, so can process mining be done through custom applications? I'm not sure I completely understand, but if you're talking about like custom ERP applications, we do work with custom applications. Obviously, we don't have pre-built extractors for those applications. So we need some help from our customers when that happens to identify where we can get the case ID, where we get the event names, and where we get the timestamp for the audit logs. But if we can get those three pieces of information exported into a data warehouse, then our mining algorithms will go and recreate that process in the Power BI visuals, right? So it doesn't matter to us what the systems are. We pre-built, we understand where data is in SAP, Oracle, Infor, Dynamics, and all of those. But custom applications with help from the customer, we can go get that data and visualize it. Yeah, so the process mining algorithms are certainly proprietary, but basically it does a lot, right? Our transformation does a lot to allow us to take a single, it's mostly around timestamps and bucketing of the events is what the algorithms do. You know, in that case that I talked about where we had 845,000 variants of the process, we needed to bucket the steps so that we delivered something that was valuable. And that process, their data showed a different event name for every single web presence that they had. So they had thousands of products, and every product had its own page, and every click on every product page had its own event name. So our algorithms actually take all of that and bucket the events into like buckets so that we can say, click on product description, you know, across 1,000 pages is one event. Click on contact us across 1,000 pages is one event. Click on product specs, right, is one event across 1,000 pages. So our algorithms take and bucket all of that data. And then they also take and split the timestamps to try to help us figure out how long an event took, how long a transaction took in an event versus between events. So there's a lot that goes into the process mining algorithms so that we can actually make a compelling visual for process mining in Power BI. And then custom workflow applications. So yeah, I mean, so any way that you can connect to the data and connect to Power BI, we can work with, right? We built this in Power BI and so that we can take advantage of all the things that Microsoft does, right? We talked about the Azure Data Factory, we talked about predictive and prescriptive, the Power Apps, but any workflow application we could work with. And the data structure needs to be, so when we do extract and transform, do our ETL process, we structure the data into basically a single table that we can then report on. So we have packages, we have transformation packages that do that. And then we also have a desktop app. So if you have CSV files, if you can extract your data into CSV files, we can transform it in a desktop app too. But basically, we get it down to a single event log table and then an attributes table that we combine in Power BI. And you can actually, I don't think I'm demoing anymore, but you can see that inside of Power BI that we connect to it. So we help with that, and we have all of those transformations already built for you. Great questions. All great questions. You know, to get process mining to work, data is the key, right? Because we're using data to recreate your processes and reverse engineer your processes. So do a lot of work with the data and automating that work to make sure process mining works flawlessly. Thank you. And let me get back here to the survey. If I can find it. There we go. Win swags.
Thank you, Haniel and David.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been awesome.
So I think we are still getting some feedback. Great session. So for everybody who is on room 2, we have a panel discussion which is starting in 7 minutes. You can grab your lunch.